Hey, Ma, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm just fantastic.
I'm here at the Capitol,
Yes,
and
good to hear you.
yeah, you know, and I was pondering some things, and I thought I would give you a call,
Hmm.
in reference to some of the things I'm pondering.
Yes,
And we got this upcoming election. This is November the 3rd,
yes.
and you brought me here. I'm in politics because you introduced this to me. So.
Yeah. Well, it's all good. I think that you have demonstrated your worthiness and your ability to do what needs to be done as it relates to your community. You have shown
Yeah.
an interest and you've applied yourself.
Yeah.
So it's all good.
So I've been thinking, I'm doing a lot of things dealing with the issues and trying to, push legislation.
Hmm.
But I just want to ask you a question. What do you think people should know about me though? What is it, because I'm really kind of a really private person and I always deal with issues, things externally, but I don't really talk about me per se. So what do you think people should know about me?
Oh boy, it was going to take me from now to 4:30.
Welcome to Smart Politics with Senator Karla May. What an awesome opportunity that's getting ready to take place right here, right now, in our country, in our state, November 3rd. This is election time. Come join me for a conversation in Smart Politics.
Well, good morning and welcome to Smart Politics. This is an exciting time right now. This is election year. I want to thank you for joining me for our first episode of Smart Politics. I am Senator Karla May, and joining me this morning is Dr. Steve Roberts, Associate Professor with the Department of Political Science at St. Louis University.
Hi, Senator. How are you?
I'm good. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great.
I don't know about outside though. The weather is pretty gloomy, and I see it's raining.
Yeah, so I'm going to concede up front. I hate winter so much. And
I do
so
too. So I'm a summer person,
I
born in
know.
June.
I'd much rather have the heat than the cold and the snow. But yeah, that can be a controversial Some people love the snow, and that's absolutely fine. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
I'm going to do like the birds and fly south for the winter. I'm hoping I have the opportunity to do that. So,
no, yeah.
So I just want to thank you for joining me this morning. I started this show because I wanted to have a common sense approach to politics. And I wanted people
Hmm.
to be able to understand what's happening, on a real tangible level where they can understand it without the technical aspect of government. So I want to thank you for joining me on this segment. This segment, we're going to be talking about a little bit about the special session
Hmm.
and, how crime has impacted our region and the necessity for a special session in the midst of COVID. We
Hmm.
have to talk about our health because, some smart person told me our health is our wealth. So,
Hmm.
anyway.
No, yeah. No, it's great to be here, and I do believe this is a really important topic. And so, as you were there, the state legislature met to kind of address this important issue, which is not only affecting, say, your St. Louis community, but this whole state of Missouri. And so, there's a lot of stuff going on right now, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation regarding, say, all the issues that are affecting Missourians.
Yeah. Before we get into it, why don't you take a few seconds to say, what is it like being in the political science realm? What are political, scientists, and what actually, do they project or do as a political scientist?
So yeah, so right now so I study American politics, particularly elections at St. Louis University in their political science department. And at least in the election world right now, it's quite an interesting time. And so as we all know, next week we're going to be having one of the most important elections of our lifetimes. And then what we do as political scientists is what we try to do is study politics in a more systematic manner. And so we're not trying to be pundits or just kind of like take the takes. I'm a pro-Democrat, I'm pro-Republican, but instead kind of understand more of the systematic reasons for why we see the patterns that we do in politics in America and in politics across the world. And so then here, for example, I particularly study state legislative elections, and which
Awesome.
is like, yeah,
studying me then.
You are in my data sets. Like, I bet if I pulled up the spreadsheets right now, I could find your ideal point that I estimated off all your roll call votes. And so here, like, we can get into that, but if you're interested in that, come to St. Louis University. We can talk about it. But
I would love to join you for a class.
Oh yeah, we can put you all the Missouri legislators kind of up on a line.
Yeah, we need to do that.
Yeah, and so this is kind of what we try to do as social scientists, is kind of systematically look at, say, what are politicians doing, what are, say, voters doing, to kind of have a better understanding of, okay, what systems are working, what systems aren't necessarily working. And so here to hopefully kind of educate individuals and educate the government itself in terms of like, well, you implemented this policy, and here's like what happened with that policy. Because in this, we don't necessarily know, especially like new innovative policies that we have. And so this is kind of a little off topic, but in terms of that, we're going to now have, at least on the ballot in St. Louis, is like, are we going to change our voting system a little bit in terms of having like a preference, like I prefer this candidate or I approve of this candidate.
Now that's getting pushed back too. So so let me just say, so for City of St. Louis, I guess, I have to admit we're a bit of traditionalists, and sometimes even myself have a little bit of apprehension when it comes to change. So, for instance, even what you're talking about, that ballot measure, and how we're talking about having what we call a nonpartisan process, which, some would say a nonpartisan process is better because actually you'll be voting for the individual, and how they deal with the issues. But some would say in the city of St. Louis, that may not be a good idea because it may cause,
confusion.
Yeah, exactly. So, exactly. So, well, let's deal with, what we tried to do in the special session.
Great.
We tried to, you tell me what you think real people feel about, what we tried to do from a political science analyst. So the governor called a special session. First of all, we should have said, in the beginning, I should have said, I want my condolences to all of the individuals and people who have lost loved ones during this time of COVID. It has had a serious impact on people and families, and we are coping. And I want to say my condolences to those individuals, and I am coping with you. I definitely want to put that in there. But in the midst of this pandemic, a special session was called to try to address crime. Now, me on my political end, I think it was just an attempt to change the narrative from the impacts of COVID to something that was going to be beneficial to a Republican base. Now, that's, you don't have to say that, but I will. but at the same time, do tough on crime measures work?
No, and so here, I think I first want to also express my condolences and sympathies to those, like, this is unprecedented times, and families are dealing with problems and tragedies that are extremely difficult, and I personally cannot imagine at this moment. So I want to share that message with you. And in speaking about the special session, in terms of like, does tough on crime work? In terms like, oftentimes, sometimes the more tough on crime measures are a little bit too tough or not preventative and like a deterrent in that way. And then kind of from the social science perspective, we kind of had this, you brought this idea, it's like, okay, how needed is, or what is the attention with this? And so one thing that St. Louis University did is that we have started this year the St. Louis University YouGov poll, in which it's going to be it's the first survey that I know that conducted by an academic institution that's going to be at least every year that's going to assess Missourians' opinions about issues important to them. And so one of the issues that we did ask Missourians about in June is, how do you think about crime in your community? And so both in Missouri and the city of St. Louis, when we asked them to rate, say, crime in their community, about 60% of individuals rated it as fair or poor. And so in this is like kind of illustrating in which that crime could be a problem, not only in the St. Louis area, but across the state, at least in the eyes of Missourians.
And so then that's St. Louis City and St. Louis County. You got the poll was representing.
Correct. So the whole poll was for the whole statewide of Missouri.
Okay.
And then here, if we break it down just to the St. Louis City and St. Louis County residents, it was also about 60% in terms of rated it, say, fair or poor in terms of crime. It was slightly lower for the whole statewide of Missouri. So we're kind of looking at 61% versus 59%, which is well within the margin of error. But in this is a decent majority in terms that are rating at least crime in their community as in a little bit more of a pessimistic light. And so this may be illustration a little bit in terms of there may be a need not only in St. Louis, but across the state in order to assess maybe the level of crime within individuals' communities.
Oh, awesome. So, so basically, I know that some of the legislation dealt with, we addressed the residency, and some of the officials from the St. Louis region, the elected officials, wanted to talk, wanted to say that, okay, the reason we have high crime is because we don't have enough police officers. And they wanted to be able to go outside of St. Louis City to be able to hire those police officers. I think it has been on the ballot at least once in the city of St. Louis, and it failed because, taxpayers were saying that they wanted their police to come from among them. So during this special session, that issue came up, and it was tried to be addressed, but the problem is it was usurping what we call local control. It was already put on the ballot. It's actually going to be on the November ballot. It's one of the propositions on the November ballot right now is residency that people are already voting on. They've already started voting. They'll be voting on it in November. So the argument has been, so what we did was we put a 3-year moratorium on it in the state, meaning that it reverts back to whatever the city decides. Whatever they decide Tuesday, it will revert back to that. But some arguments have been, well, if St. Louis people, the residents of St. Louis City can work in St. Louis County, why can't individuals from St. Louis County work in St. Louis City in the capacity of public safety? And that has been one of the real questions that has come up. So I'm sure that people will say more police officers are the answer to crime, but I think we have some underlying issues as well, such as poverty and things like that.
No, I think you're on point, in which I think it's going to be needed a multi-pronged approach in order to solve this crime issue, or to at least help the crime issue not only in St. Louis and across the state. And in here, just as you were talking, just one thing that kind of struck me, and which is the issue of local control is really important. And so right now, what we can kind of think about, the conversation we're having right now is focusing a little bit more on police. But here you may have a constituent who's well, also another big local control issue right now is okay, what are the requirements on schools with COVID and mask mandates?
Yes.
And so all of this is kind of related, in which maybe I'm just kind of speculating, I'm going to concede, in which some people might, I want local control on this aspect, but maybe not on this aspect. And so it's important to kind of respect these others' opinions and kind of have a sophisticated or intelligent conversation regarding what is kind of the solution to these problems. And then police may be one solution or one part of the solution, but also addressing, say, homelessness in the community, or say poverty in the community, because these are also going to be factors, especially in times of COVID, when people are probably a little bit more stressed and concerned about their economic and financial situation.
Exactly.
And so this kind of multi-pronged approach, because one of the issues that we asked on the St. Louis University poll, for example, what issues are important to you in the governor's race. And then here, the economy was really up there on top, but also right up there on top was, like, say, COVID as well. And so
Exactly.
there's many things going on that are related to one another. And then it's
And
important for us.
see, that's a pretty good poll, because you're talking about the economy, but COVID is actually affecting the economy.
Mhm.
And if people are not healthy, they can't work. That's part of
Mhm.
the economy.
Yeah.
If people can't go to jobs, and because they have underlying health issues, it affects their ability to live, eat, all of that, and afford where they live. So, Dr. Rogers, let me do this. Let me ask you, would you stick around for the next segment?
Mhm.
Are you willing? Okay.
I'm
So,
happy to, yeah.
I appreciate it. So listen, please join me as we discuss how Missouri fits into the big picture. We'll be right back after this moment commercial.
I think that people know quite a bit about you already, since this is your hometown. You were born and raised here, and you went to school here, and this is your life's work, and your family. You have a large family here, and I think that people know more than you can anticipate. But if necessary, I don't feel it's absolutely necessary to know any more than what they already know. Because you have been an elected official, you have, this is your hometown. This is your hometown.
Thank you for calling CoolDownSt. Louis.org Care Center. My name is Nick, a volunteer. Do you know we will be working with Ameren, Missouri, the Missouri Public Service Commission, Spire, Castle, and the Urban League to help more St. Louis County and city residents in need of utility assistance? Well, it's more than that. This year we're hosting a series of virtual utility forums. Our first will be the Cool Down Summer Utility Forum in September, where we will help you with more than just a utility bill. Our winterizing utility forums begin online in October. Our webinars will provide you with other resources, and if you can't wait and are in need of utility assistance right now, sign up over at the button of Get Help Now on our homepage. Then call Ameren and let them know you have an application pending with us. Thank you for joining me.
Welcome back. Welcome back. So we are starting our segment 2 with Dr. Rogers. He's an associate professor at St. Louis University in the Department of Political Science. Thank you for returning with us. We're going to be talking about how Missouri fits into the big picture. So, Dr. Rogers, you did mention a poll, and we're talking about, the governor's race. And you said, people were concerned about COVID, and they're also talking about, the race that we're having. Can Missouri possibly be blue? I'm sure that in the past, at one point in time, Missouri was probably a Democratic state, but right now it's been a red state for some time, with Republican controlling the state capital. So, what do you think? What are the numbers showing?
Well, yeah, so at least within our survey that was conducted in early October, right now it seems like we're going to see a trend that's similar to the more recent elections, in which, so for example, we have Trump leading Biden about 52 to 43, and then Parson leading Galway about 50 to 44. And so in each of these cases, at least in kind of in the statewide, Missouri is probably going to remain a red state, as it has at the national level for pretty much like the last 20 some odd years. And then a little bit less so, there's been more mix in terms of the governorship at the statewide level. But here, I think it's also important to consider that there are aspects, maybe like we kind of dig down a little bit deeper, where we are having Missouri kind of be on the national stage a little bit more. So we have, I think many of us are aware, there's a very competitive congressional race out in like St. Louis County, St. Louis City area between Ann Wagner and Jill Shoup.
Yes.
So here, this is a situation where Democrats, so Galway or Biden still could pull it out, but here maybe a little more optimistic spot for the Democrats could be in the Missouri second, a little bit. And then there's also been these more recent sort of ballot initiatives, like say the expansion of Medicaid, which Democrats and typically were a little bit more in favor of than Republicans, at least at the elected official level, and that passed in August.
Yeah, well, so when you're talking about that's a good indication. But I think the expansion of Medicaid was probably a bipartisan approach, because if you really look at healthcare in rural Missouri, most of those individuals have to drive 3 to 5 hours to actually get healthcare and get procedures done. So that concerns me too, because I'm wondering people's voting pattern. You're voting against your interests. So if your health is important, you know, whether the candidate is Democrat or Republican, who's in the governor's mansion is going to determine how Medicaid expansion is actually implemented in the state of Missouri. And that could be a huge impact on people's health.
No, I think you're exactly right. And so this upcoming election, it's going to be very important, both at the governor's level, but also at your state legislative level. And so then here, there's like the state legislators and the governor are going to work together in order to kind of, how are we going to pay for the Medicaid expansion? This is kind of a big question kind of on the table. There's some funds set aside already, but here the state government still needs to make these decisions. So while the Missouri across the state largely supported Medicaid expansion, we still need the elected officials to implement Medicaid expansion.
That's exactly it. And over 90% of it, though, is federal costs. So it'll be covered by the federal. And people say, well, some of my colleagues will say, we want to protect our taxpayers' dollars. But what they fail to realize is, they realize that they know that the federal taxes you pay, if we don't utilize them as a state, they go somewhere else. And just like in the failed attempt to not implement the Affordable Care Act, that $86 million from feds that we didn't realize went to Illinois. It went to another state. So we pay federal taxes. So we need our federal dollars to come back to Missouri and work for Missourians, and not go somewhere else with this, it's not our responsibility to, what I call, regulate the budget of the federal level. We're regulating state budget.
No, I think I'm glad you made this point, because I think this does get lost sometimes in the conversation, in which the ultimate plan with the Medicaid expansion is that Missouri is going to pay 10 cents, the federal government will pay 90 cents, for every dollar that we're kind of spending. And I think that's that's a deal I would take personally, in which it's like, yeah, I'll give you 10 cents, you give me 90 cents, and that can rack up a lot. And most Missourians
would. That's the common sense about it. See, people don't understand that. Feds pay 90%, state pays 10%. Any common sense person in their household would make that deal.
Yeah, I would. I mean, that's so I'm about to go grocery shopping this afternoon. That's a hell of a coupon. And so
exactly.
And so but it still does need to be implemented, sort of thing. And so here, I just it is important. Healthcare and COVID were two of the most important issues, kind of in this governor, economy, COVID, and healthcare. And healthcare is repeatedly this kind of important issue. And I think it is important to consider, we in St. Louis, you and I are living a few miles from one another. We have options of Barnes Hospital. We're both born to Barnes Hospital, I think.
Exactly.
And then St. Louis University Hospital, there's plenty, Mercy, all these hospitals. But there are people that kind of in more rural areas where they have to drive hours, as you said.
Healthcare. And we have urgent cares here, and I think that these are the things that's putting Missouri in the national spotlight. Now, we have to talk about, Amendment 3, where they're trying to undo Clean Missouri. Now, Clean Missouri passed in 114 counties in the state of Missouri. That was a bipartisan effort. That means that we came together, regardless of party. That was erased. Democrat and Republican was erased when it came to Clean Missouri and the ability of, the redistricting in the state of Missouri. That's going to put us on this national stage, because we're headed into redistricting. That's why we're doing the census this year.
Yeah. No, so you're exactly right in terms of in 2008, Amendment 1 or Clean Missouri passed 62 to 38. And then here we pulled on Amendment 3, which is one of the key, there's many aspects to Amendment 3, but one of the key aspects is they're going to change, as you said, how we're going to redraw our districts next time. And so for those a little less familiar, every 10 years, as you said, we take the census and then we redraw the districts in order to kind of make the populations a little bit more equal. And this is a contentious issue kind of across the country, because Democrats and Republicans may sometimes want to draw the districts to their favor to some degree. And so what amendment, like the previous amendments, what's on the books right now is that a demographer, an independent person, is going to kind of draw the districts. But here, Amendment 3 would kind of put a little bit more, take the demographer a little bit more out of it and put it more into a commission format appointed by the people in state government.
Right, and that's putting it back to like the way it was, basically partisan. Because actually, historically, I think the last 2 times, the commission actually didn't draw the lines. It ended up in court because it was deadlocked. And so what Clean Missouri did was, we'll have the demographer to draw the lines, and unless you get more than half of the vote to overturn that.
I think it's about 70% what you need, in which like basically a vast opposition in order to strike down the demographer. But and so here we actually polled on this at the St. Louis University poll. And then there was pretty much 43% of individuals across Missouri were opposed, 35 were for. And so what this is basically saying is that a plurality of people wanted basically to keep things the way they are, like have this demographer and have maybe this more clean or fair process. And so then in this, there is a lot of unfamiliarity. So we had 23% of individuals were not sure, at least in early October. And so in this, it's probably important for, say, viewers here and constituents, maybe have a conversation with their friends and family, because Amendment 3 is a little confusing, like the way they're kind of phrasing it. There's a lot of ballot language on there. But here it's largely a question of, are we kind of undoing what we did 2 years ago in terms of that Clean Missouri amendment versus now? If I had to forecast a little bit, I bet Amendment 3 will fail, but it's going to depend on who goes out to vote and who shows up to the polls.
Yeah. So, but I think that the courts cleared up the language, but we know a no vote on it will keep the demographer and keep it at a fair process and keep the scales balanced. And I think that people locally, like I said, it passed in 114 counties around the state. So I think people locally want to see the change that they're implementing. And that's another thing that kind of irritates me. It's because the people are the government. Remember the founding principles of our Constitution. We the people. Even in Missouri, the first sentence in the Missouri Constitution referenced the people having the power. And when the people rise up and say, we want this change, then the people that they elected has the audacity to say the people didn't know what they was talking about. They want to overturn what the people did. So you have to ask yourself, did they know what they were talking about when they elected them?
No, but I think, so I think, and there's been multiple instances recently, kind of going back to your original question of like, is Missouri blue or not? Where we think about where the people have spoken, in which people spoke about Medicaid, they spoke about right to work. And so these are different issues in which it's like, we ask the question to the voters, then we may actually get the response in terms of what the people want.
Exactly. Well, Dr. Rogers, I really want to thank you for joining me on my very first segment of Smart Politics.
It's great to be here. Yeah.
And hopefully you can come back and we can continue this discussion because I would love to hear your views coming from a political science perspective. And the numbers do matter, and the polls matter because it lets us get insight into how Missourians are actually thinking and feeling. And we want to be intentional about what we do in politics. At least I do. I want to make sure that people understand what we're doing up there and why we're doing it and why we're voting no on something versus why we're voting yes on something. But thank you again. This will end our segment of the big picture and end your participation at this moment. Thank you so much. Now, this comes to a conclusion for us in Smart Politics, but I want to put it out there. What do you think? Is so many issues on the ballot and so many things that are going to be affecting you. I think this is a very crucial time for you to vote because that is how your voice is heard. 1 + 1 always equals 2. And so when everybody votes, that means we're made up of this huge body of voters. And if one voice is silent within the whole body feels the ramifications of that silence. So I'm going to encourage you to vote and let us know what you think about what's happening in politics today.
Yeah, to all my black brothers and sisters and siblings out here trying to live your life, who know that when you look like us, the world ain't always nice. I'm thinking of you. Yeah. If they say that you're worth nothing, let me tell you that they're wrong. If they say that you're not good enough, then listen to this song. Shouldn't have to spend so many years oppressed and colonized, but there's nothing more beautiful than living our black lives. If they say that you're worth nothing, let me tell you that they're wrong. If they say that you're not good enough, then listen to this song. We shouldn't have to spend so many years oppressed and colonized, but there's nothing more important than saving your black life. Black lives matter, black lives are beautiful. Black lives matter, black lives are beautiful.